A young woman was taken to be executed inside a Yugoslavian town on November 25, 1941. Instead of being hanged on the gallows, she was to be hanged by a pole. Despite the fact that this method of execution was fairly frightening and involved using a post to sentence someone, large audiences nonetheless turned out to watch it in action. Lili Bohm was one of several young women who were thrown into the thick of things during World War II, and she ultimately paid the price by being put to death by her adversaries. What occurred with her execution, though, and what is her story? Welcome to theuntoldpast. Please remember to subscribe in order to help our channel. Throughout the Second World War, a large number of nations cooperated with the Nazis and were occupied by Germany. Yugosvlia joined the Axis alliance on March 25, 1941, allowing the Germans to enter Greece through the country. However, Yugoslavia was later divided by the Axis powers, and a great deal of terror was committed inside each of the several regions. Executions and deportations to concentration and extermination camps were commonplace, and various groups, like the Ustase militia, imposed a reign of brutality on civilians. Very little is known about Lili Bohm's life, and she was only 20 years old when she was put to death. She joined the Young Guard, a Jewish youth organization in her hometown of Novi Sad, during World War II. However, during the war, the Hungarian army and military, along with the Nazis, stormed her neighborhood. Many people rebelled, and their actions were frequently met with the cruelest retaliation. Those who were thought to be sabotaging the invading forces would be tortured or even killed. Lili Bohm participated in organizations that organized resistance actions against the Hungarians and in groups that undermined Hungarian troops. Lili Bohm was aware that resisting was risky because this offense carried a death penalty. Being a woman herself, she was aware that if she was discovered, she may also face further atrocities. However, she soon found herself in the hands of the adversary. Lili Bohm was apprehended by the occupying police forces and the Hungarian gendarmerie on September 20, 1941. In particular, she had a weapon on her person, and additional research revealed that she was a member of resistance cells and that she either planned to use the weapon against Hungarian occupation forces or was harboring and concealing weapons for resistors. Although it is unclear exactly what she intended to do that day, the mere fact that she was carrying a firearm was sufficient to get her a death sentence. The military court verified her execution, and it is believed that she too endured a difficult time while inside. Lili Bohm was imprisoned with other suspected rebels at a Hungarian-occupied prison in Yugoslav for a few months before being put to death by hanging from a pole. A handful of guards followed Lili Bohm as she was carried from the prison to her death on November 25, 1941. She was escorted by a few of them to the execution post, where the executioner who would execute her met her. The invading troops assembled a sizable crowd to watch her death, and the soldiers thought that witnessing the execution of this 20-year-old lady would deter others from committing serious crimes and joining resistance groups. The pole-hanging technique developed by Lili Bohm was a variant of the short drop technique and was employed in various nations, including Hungary and Czechoslovakia. There were numerous processes involved in carrying it out, and the gallows was a pole or post. It was known as the Wurjgalgen, or strangling gallows, and it seemed like a pretty cruel way to be put to death to the masses. The condemned was carried up many stairs to a post or pillar that was typically 3 meters high. After that, ropes were fastened to the condemned. The condemned were suspended in the air by a chest sling that was wrapped over their torso and under their arms after a rope was fastened around their feet and then secured by a pulley system at the base and bottom of the post. The death sentence was typically read when the victim was held motionless prior to the drop and the noose was fastened around their neck and fastened to a hook at the top of the pole. The victim pulled downward after the chest sling was released, and the assistant executioner, who was typically older and more seasoned, guided the fall with a foot rope. The executioner would stand on a platform behind the post. The executioner was supposed to manually dislocate the condemned's neck by shoving and forcing their head to one side. He did this by placing the heel of his hand beneath the condemned's jaw, which increased the force on the neck at the end of the drop. By using the gallows, pole hanging was thought by some to be a more expedient and merciful mode of execution. When done correctly, it took around a minute for someone to perish. Lili Bohm was the victim of this fate. After guiding her to the post and holding her in a chest sling, the executioner fastened the ropes around her torso and the pulley system before securing the noose over her neck. Since her post wasn't particularly tall, it wasn't 3 meters, the executioner and his helper collaborated to end her life. With numerous Hungarian guards surrounding her, she had no chance of escaping her fate on the execution post. She was also wearing a dark clothing and had her arms fastened to the post. Wearing the traditional German Stahlhelm, these demonstrated their support for the Axis alliance. 2 guards stood right next to Lili Bohm's body, protecting it from anyone attempting to save the young woman, who was just 20 years old. During the Second World War, Lili Bohm was not the only lady to suffer this fate. Many young women were jailed during this hazardous time. Lili Bohm, for example, was a Jewish lady who battled the occupation she was forced to live under because she knew that she would face persecution if she did not join the resistance. Because she was carrying a weapon in public, which was not necessarily a major shock during a time of turmoil and war, she was executed for pretty trivial reasons. Although she may have carried this for personal protection, the fact that she was found to have belonged to the resistance organization the Young Guard was sufficient to have her executed. Before being given a death sentence, she probably had a difficult interrogation process. Her body was temporarily placed on the post to send a strong message to the local population. This was done to force individuals to line up and refrain from taking up arms against the German or Axis enemies, as well as to discourage others from joining the resistance. One of the major worries of the Axis forces who marched into many different countries during the Second World War was resistance, and to many everyone was a suspect. When Lili Bohm was hauled to her execution on the post in front of a sizable audience, she was only 20 years old. There were teenagers who were executed by occupying forces during World War II, with some hanged from trees for their suspected or confirmed resistance, and Lili Bohm's story is one which is not the most well known, and she deserves to be remembered for her actions in standing up to the enemy inside of her homelands. We appreciate your support by having you watch, and please remember to subscribe. Thank you for viewing.